Hi there guys, so welcome back. This is part 5 of Building Maple Story. As normal, I'm going to open up Unreal Engine projects and go to Maple Small, which is my project. Double click, and while that's opening, we are on module 19. And new folder. I think we covered that one in the last session. Let me just check.
And inside of this folder, and by the way, you can give the folders colors. So if you can right click.
Yeah, we covered that one in the last session, so let's go to Parent and Child Blueprints.
So now it's time to add the character. Just like what I told you before, right click here and go to Blueprint Classes or Class. And here, when you click on all classes here, search for paper. And now, instead of making this character, remember we are working in 2D, so we have to make a paper character. So clicking on that one here and clicking select. Now you have to call it something. And for now, I want to explain to you what parent and child blueprints are. So first one here, let's create it and call it character base. Now we have a character base here, and let's right click it. And now you can see it says create child blueprint class. So let me create it, and I want to explain to you what I'm doing. So BP, let's call it BP player base. And let's make another one, paper. And now instead of making this character, remember we are working in 2D, so we have to make a paper character. So clicking on that one here and clicking select. Now you have to call it something, and for now I want to explain to you what parent and child blueprints are. So first one here, let's create it and call it character base. Now we have a character base here, and let's right click it, and now you can see it says create child blueprint. Blueprint class. So let me create it, and I want to explain to you what I'm doing. So BP, let's call it BP player base, and let's make another one here from the character base. Right click on it again and create child blueprint class. Let's call this one BP enemy base. Okay.
Just so that it's clear, the BP stands for blueprints.
Okay, so what I'm doing right here is, let me actually save everything first. So what I'm doing right here is we created a base character, and from that I right clicked and created child blueprints. So what child blueprints are is when you code something inside of character base, that code will automatically carry over to the childs. So remember, enemy base and player base are both child of character base. So whatever I code or I do inside of character base will also be applied to enemy base and player base. And this is very useful, so you don't have to code the same thing over and over again. So if I, for example, want to code something here, and I want the same thing to be here and the same thing to be here, that would be a lot of work and it wouldn't be as optimized. Instead, I created child blueprints, so whatever I do inside of here will also automatically be carried over to the enemy and the player. And for example, in the character base, you can double click on it, and we have something called a character movement component. So inside of here, for example, you can control any movement of the character. For example, how fast should your character walk? And if I write, for example, let's say 200 instead of 600, and compiling is just saving. We will talk about that in the next lesson. So compiling and saving here. And if I minimize this and open my, let's say, player, and I look at the player's movement component, you can see it automatically went down to 200 because remember, it is a child of character base. So whatever I do inside of the character, it will be applied on the player. So if I go back here and I click on this small arrow to go back to default and it goes back to 600. Now, if I go to the player, you can see in the player, it also changed back to 600. So this is very useful. And what we want to do now inside of the player base, we want to right click here. And now we want to create the players because now we have a base for the players. So let's right click and I want to create this one called Serena. And we also have another character called...
Yep, just going to do that.
Called Luke. We will work with him later, but we can create him right now. So create again child blueprint from the player and call it BP Luke. Okay, so now these two children, whenever we code something in the player base, for example, the movement, we don't really want to code the movement here for Luke. And then we want to code the same movement for Serena because these two players, they have the same movement. They are running the same way. They are jumping with the same button. For example, clicking on space to jump or clicking on the keyboard arrows to run around. We don't want to do that twice. We just have to code this inside of the player base. Now, it wouldn't make sense to code the movement inside of character base because remember, we have an enemy base. And the enemy is not really walking like you as the player. The enemy is not using a keyboard. The enemy doesn't have a mouse to look around with. So it doesn't make sense to code the player's movement inside of the enemy because, it's artificial intelligence. It doesn't really have a keyboard. It's not a human. So it would make more sense to code the player's movement inside of player base. All right, so now we have the parent and child blueprints created. And again, remember, if you need any help with this ever, you can always go inside of my Discord server and I'm more than willing to help you out with all of this. So let's right click now and create a new folder. And I'm just going to call it player. And I'm making a new one called enemy. So we are staying organized. I'm going to put this enemy base instead of enemy. We are going to create AI later on. And then putting Luke, the player base, and Serena inside of player. So now with that done, let's click on File and Save All, and let's move on to the next lesson.
Nice and easy.
Before we continue, let's take an overview of the blueprint graph. So let's go to our blueprints folder inside of player, and let's just go into this one called player base. Now it's going to open like this, but you have to click on Open Full Editor. A blueprint editor, and this happens whenever you don't have any code inside of here yet. So clicking on here, and you can see this is the blueprint graph. And inside of here, you have the
So as you can see, mine opened differently for some reason. I'm just trying to find out why. So event graph. There you go, event graph. So there's I basically double clicked it, it opened up, and there are 3 tabs at the top of the main board, and I've clicked on event graph. So I'm now back to where the video is.
The event graph. And inside of the event graph, this is where you write all of your code. You can see here Unreal Engine provides you with very simple events by default. And to navigate around inside of the event graph, you can hold the right click and you can pan around like this and use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. You can also right click to add functions. Later on, we are going to use this to add some code, but don't worry about this. This probably looks overwhelming for you. There are a lot of things that you can add inside of here, but we will be working with that throughout the whole course. Apart from the event graph where we write the code, we also have a viewport. And inside of viewport, this is where we add our items. So you can see here to the left, we have something called components. And inside of this component tab here, for example, the sprite, we are going to add a flipbook here. So you can see in this details panel, just like I told you about here in this details panel, you know, where when we click on things here in our level, we can edit items and edit, for example, the location, the rotation, the scale. We can also edit things about the collision. This is the same thing here inside of the blueprint class. When we click on a component, we can add settings about this component inside of the details panel. So for example, the sprite, later on, we are going to add the character. And you can see when I click on this source flipbook, you can see we can see the animations for the character that we created in a previous lesson. So
right, just going to increase my screen, sprites.
Same as before, we have a details panel where we can edit settings. And later on, we are going to add more components, and this can be done by clicking on this add button. And you can see you can add a lot of things. For example, a cube, a sphere, you can add lighting, audio, and lots of things. Down here, we can see our events that we created in our event graph. So if you go back to the event graph here, you can see Unreal Engine gives you these by default, and you can also see these events called begin play, actor, begin overlap, and tick, and you can see them here. Later on, when we add functions, you can also see your functions here. You can see the macros, you can see variables, and I'm going to explain those in a later lesson. And after that, we also have this toolbar over here. The most important thing is this button called compile. And whenever you write any code, so if I just write something for fun, you can see here it gives you a question mark. And it says dirty, needs to be recompiled. So it tells you that you have to click on this button whenever you are done writing your code. So I have to click on this button. And what this button is, it just checks if the code you have written is good or not. So if I click on it and it gives me this check mark, it means I don't have any errors in my code and I am ready to press play and play my game. But if you do something wrong, it will give you a cross and it will tell you you have done something wrong. And when you get an error, it will give it to you down here in the compiler results. You can see here it succeeded. Right now we don't have any errors. But if you have an error, it will appear down here and it will tell you what your error is. Now I am going to select this node right now. This was just for testing. I'm going to click on delete. And again, here in the toolbar, you can save your project, of course. You can search for blueprints. You can go to the class settings, go to the class defaults, and so on. And we will be working with all of that throughout this project.
So I'm just going to pause there a second just to kind of explain that when you first go into a program like this, it looks ever so bewildering. It's you look at it, you have no idea what anything is, and just looking at that short tutorial, already I'm feeling familiar with the compile, being able to move something and put it in there, add audio, and then just. Yeah, I can just drag a file in. So yeah, I'm feeling familiar with the program. I just thought that was worth saying.
Let's take a look at events and functions. I'm going to go back to my BP player base. So inside of here, as default, Unreal Engine gives you these default events. And events are always marked with red. So I'm going to hover over these right now, and I'm going to click on delete on my keyboard. I don't need.
Okay, I'll do the same. Delete key on the keyboard.
Them right now, but you have this one, the very basic one called begin play. So this event tells you what should I do whenever I click here on the play, whenever I begin playing my game. So for example, very simple, you can drag from this execution pin and dragging out and saying print, so searching for print. This is the very basic function that you learn from the beginning, and it just prints some text to the screen. So clicking on this function, so this is a function and you can see it by the F.
Type in print, click print string.
Up here, so this is an event, this is a function. You always in Blueprint need events to fire code, and the code consists of several functions. So always needing an event to fire code, else your engine doesn't know when you want to fire this code. So if I had this disconnected, and you can do that by holding Alt on your keyboard and clicking here, this will disconnect them. So if I had it like here, the engine will never know when to fire this code if you don't have an event coupled up with it. So I'm going to drag it here to the other execution pin and connecting it. Clicking on compile, remember to do that. You can also here, instead of compiling and saving all the time, you can click on these three buttons or dots and say save on compile, unsuccessful only. And what that means is whenever you compile,
Yes, I compile, save on compile, on succession, click save for now.
It will automatically save for you if this check mark appears. So now what happens is on begin play, my screen is going to say hello. I'm going to minimize this a little bit, and you have to look here up to the top left. So clicking on play, and you can see nothing happens. And this is actually a small mistake by me. So let's actually add the player base. Remember earlier I actually told you that we want to add the pawn. So let us click on the cross here. Let's actually do it now before we forget it. So going to edit. And
right, so he has actually closed this. So I'm just going to save, close, back to main map, and then he goes edit and project settings. So edit project settings, and back to the video.
And the project settings. And in the maps and modes, going up here again, remember I told you that we needed to add this later on when we create a character, and we have one now. So clicking on here, and let's make our character Serena for now. We are going to code Serena.
So maps, modes, default, Serena. Bear in mind we did do this in the previous session.
So we're not going to create a player base right now. So we want to spawn Serena into the world later on. So I'm just going to select my default pawn class to Serena. But later on we will have a character selection screen. And when we have that, we just make it to none, because then the player selects the character and they will spawn as either Serena or Luke, depending on what they have selected. But right now we don't have a character selection screen, so I'm going to spawn as Serena by default. I'm going to click on cross here, go to the world settings, and make sure here in the override game mode that
Close. GM Maple Story, yeah.
Serena is also applied here. Now let's click up and play again, and you can see my screen says hello, and I'm following through.
Hello.
The ground, you can see here I'm falling through the ground because I don't have a player start, and we can add one as well just so we don't fall through the ground. So going here in the quickly add button, going to basic.
So I need to I've lost my mouse. Hang on. There we go. Right, stop. Yeah, so I don't know what he did, but I can't get back to his map, or the map, so I'm having to restart Unreal Engine.
Oh, and I'm falling through the ground. You can see here I'm falling through the ground because I don't have a player start, and we can add one as well just so we don't fall through the ground. So going here in the quickly add button.
Yeah, so I still can't find out where the map's gone.
Going to basic and adding this player start. So this is where we can start here, and if you click on G, you can
Right, still don't know what he did, so I'm to restart again. I can't get back to what is the tile map. Oh, this is frustrating. I'm going to have to let them know on chapter 22 you clicked play on the map. The map said hello. Map said hello, and we fell through the map. Cannot now get back to the tile map. The screen is black. Even if I close Unreal Engine 5, I cannot see the map no longer. Please assist. So that's probably where I'm going to have to leave this video, because I can't get back to this for some reason. So if any of you guys know and you're watching this video, let me know. I've tried clicking home, I've tried navigating, I've tried pressing all the buttons, and unfortunately I can't get back to this. So guys, yeah, if you like watching this and you know how to do it, pop a comment and I'll get back to the next video. And the next one is variables and the setting up the character. So the next two are actually quite important, and obviously whichever one gets back to me first, we'll move on to chapters 23 and 24. Cheers guys, keep watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Know that they ride or die. I keep boys by my seat. Know that they ride or die.